The silent collapse of Windows has already started, and most people haven't even noticed it yet. When we talk about collapse, we're not talking about a dramatic shutdown, not a sudden disappearance of millions of computers flickering off at once. We're talking about something slower, quieter, more subtle, a shift in relevance, a change in power, a gradual erosion of dominance. For decades, Microsoft Windows wasn't just an operating system. It was the operating system. It was the digital ground beneath the feet of the modern world. Offices ran on it. Schools depended on it. Gamers swore by it. Entire industries were built around it. To own a computer was almost by default to use Windows. That dominance shaped the tech landscape for over 30 years. But dominance, especially in technology, is never permanent. To understand the silent collapse, we need to go back to when Windows truly ruled everything. In the late 1990s and early 2000s, the personal computer was the center of digital life. If you wanted to go online, you used a PC. If you wanted to write a document, edit a photo, play a game, send an email, manage a business, you did it on Windows. Alternatives existed, but they were niche, expensive, or impractical for most people. Apple computers were stylish but limited in market share. Linux was powerful but intimidating. Windows became the default choice, not necessarily because it was perfect, but because it was everywhere. And in technology, ubiquity is power. That power allowed Microsoft to shape the rules of software. Developers built for Windows first because that's where the users were. Hardware manufacturers designed drivers for Windows because that's what customers expected. Enterprises standardized on Windows because compatibility meant efficiency. This network effect fed on itself. The more Windows grew, the more essential it became. It was a self-reinforcing loop of dominance. But dominance in tech depends on being at the center of innovation. And slowly, almost invisibly, the center moved. The first major crack in the foundation wasn't visible on the desktop at all. It happened in your pocket. The smartphone revolution fundamentally changed computing. Instead of sitting down at a desk to use a PC, people began carrying powerful computers in their hands. Social media, messaging, navigation, banking, entertainment, all migrated to mobile. The operating systems that mattered most were no longer desktop systems. They were mobile platforms. Microsoft tried to compete, but it was too late. The ecosystem was already consolidating around competitors. While Windows still powered office computers, it was no longer the center of digital life. As mobile grew, web applications matured. Instead of installing heavy desktop software, users began relying on browsers. Tools that once required native Windows programs became cloud-based services. Email moved to the browser. Documents moved to the browser. Collaboration moved to the browser. The operating system beneath the browser became less important. As long as you could run a modern browser, you could access the same tools. This shift weakened Windows in a subtle but profound way. It stripped away its unique advantage. At the same time, Apple refined its ecosystem. Apple didn't chase market share in the traditional sense. Instead, it built an integrated experience. Its computers running macOS became deeply connected with its phones and tablets. Messages synchronized, files synced instantly. Calls flowed between devices. For users inside that ecosystem, switching felt unnecessary. Windows machines, even powerful ones, felt isolated by comparison. The experience gap widened. Meanwhile, Google approached the problem from another angle. Instead of fighting Windows with a traditional desktop system, it pushed the browser as the platform and introduced Chrome. At first, it seemed laughable, a laptop. That was basically a browser. Critics dismissed it, but for schools, casual users, and cloud-first environments, it was enough. It was cheaper, simpler, easier to manage. Over time, it quietly carved out significant market share, especially in education. A generation of students grew up using Chromebooks instead of Windows PCs. That matters. Habits formed early tend to persist. Inside Microsoft, leadership changed. Under Satya Nadella, the company shifted its focus toward cloud services, enterprise tools, and subscriptions. Azure became central. Office became Microsoft 365. The strategy made financial sense. Recurring revenue from services is more predictable than one-time OS licenses. But that shift signaled something deeper. Windows was no longer the company's primary growth engine. It became one piece of a broader ecosystem rather than the centerpiece. When a company stops treating a product as its core identity, that product inevitably changes. Look at Windows 11. Its release wasn't a revolution. It was an iteration, a visual refresh, a tightening of hardware requirements. Some users embraced it, others resisted. But what stood out wasn't excitement. It was indifference. In earlier decades, a new version of Windows felt monumental. It defined era. Windows 95, Windows XP, even Windows 7. These weren't just updates. They were milestones. Windows 11 felt like maintenance, necessary, but not transformative. At the same time, many users are still on Windows 10, and some resist upgrading at all. That hesitation reflects fatigue. Over the years, Windows updates have sometimes introduced instability, forced reboots, UI, inconsistencies, and controversial changes. Trust eroded slowly, not catastrophically, but gradually. Each small frustration chipped away at the perception of Windows as stable and reliable. Another silent shift happened in the developer community. Developers increasingly prioritize cross-platform frameworks and web technologies. Building a Windows-only desktop app makes less sense in a world where users expect their software to run on Mac, Linux, tablets, and in browsers. The more apps become platform agnostic, the less strategic leverage Windows holds. It becomes a host rather than a gatekeeper. Gaming was long considered Windows' fortress. DirectX brought hardware support, and massive game libraries made it the undisputed king of PC gaming. But even here, cracks are forming. Valve introduced the Steam Deck, a handheld device running a Linux-based system. It proved that high-quality PC gaming doesn't strictly require Windows. Proton compatibility layers improved dramatically. More developers optimized for multiple platforms from the start. While Windows remains dominant in gaming, the idea that it is irreplaceable has weakened. The rise of Linux in mainstream conversations also signals change. For years, Linux was viewed as niche, reserved for servers and enthusiasts. Now, it powers cloud infrastructure, development environments, containers, and increasingly user-friendly desktop distributions like Ubuntu. Developers often feel more at home in Unix-like environments. Even Microsoft integrated Linux into Windows through WSL. Ironically, to stay relevant, Windows had to embrace its longtime rival. Hardware trends compound the issue. Modern processors, especially custom silicon, blur the lines between traditional PCs and mobile devices. Apple's transition to its own chips demonstrated performance per watt advantages that challenged long-held assumptions about x86. Windows devices still rely heavily on third-party chips. Efforts to expand into ARM-based systems have been inconsistent. Compatibility layers help, but friction remains. When hardware and software are vertically integrated, optimization can reach levels difficult to match in a more fragmented ecosystem. There's also a cultural shift happening. Younger users often view computers differently than previous generations. Many don't feel the need to own a powerful desktop or laptop. A smartphone and maybe a tablet are enough. For school assignments, cloud tools suffice. For entertainment, streaming dominates. For communication, apps rule. The PC becomes optional rather than essential. And if the PC is optional, Windows is optional. Corporate environments still rely heavily on Windows, but even that stronghold is evolving. Companies increasingly adopt bring your own device policies. Web-based enterprise software reduces dependency on specific operating systems. Virtual desktops and remote work solutions abstract the OS away from the user. When your primary workspace is a browser window connected to a cloud server, the local operating system becomes less visible, less critico. None of this means Windows is disappearing tomorrow. Far from it. It still runs on hundreds of millions of devices. It still generates billions in revenue. But collapse in technology doesn't always mean extinction. Sometimes it means losing centrality. It means going from being the default to being one option among many. There's also a psychological component. For years, Windows symbolized computing itself. That symbolic, power-shaped perception. Now, when people think of innovation, they often think of smartphones, AI assistants, cloud services, or sleek integrated ecosystems. Windows rarely sits at the center of that conversation. It feels reactive rather than visionary. Even the update model reflects this change. Instead of grand, infrequent releases that redefine the experience, updates roll out continuously, features appear and disappear. Interfaces shift incrementally. The operating system becomes a service rather than a product. That approach aligns with modern software philosophy, but it reduces the sense of occasion. Windows blends into the background. Another factor is fragmentation within the Windows ecosystem. Different manufacturers ship devices with varying quality, drivers, and configurations. Performance and battery life differ widely. The experience lacks consistency. In contrast, tightly controlled ecosystems can guarantee a certain baseline of polish. When users encounter problems on Windows machines, they may blame Windows itself, even if the issue stems from hardware partners. Security perceptions also matter. While Windows security has improved dramatically over the years, its historical reputation for viruses and malware lingers. Even if modern protections are strong, legacy narratives persist. In a world increasingly concerned about privacy and data security, perception can be as powerful as reality. The subscription economy subtly reshapes user expectations to, instead of paying for a copy of Windows, users often receive it bundled with hardware. The visible cost disappears. That seems convenient, but it also reduces perceived value. When something feels free or bundled, it feels less like a premium product and more like infrastructure. Artificial intelligence may accelerate the shift. As AI assistants integrate into devices and cloud services, the operating system could become even less relevant. If your primary interaction is through voice or intelligent agents, the underlying OS fades further into the background. Microsoft is investing heavily in AI, but again, the strategy centers on services spanning multiple platforms, not Windows alone. So what does silent collapse look like in practice? It looks like declining cultural relevance. It looks like developers targeting the web first. It looks like students growing up on Chromebooks. It looks like creatives preferring Mac. It looks like gamers experimenting with Linux-based devices. It looks like enterprises moving workflows to the cloud. It looks like Microsoft making more money from Azure than from Windows licenses. It's important to emphasize that this shift is gradual. Windows remains deeply entrenched in many industries. Specialized software, legacy systems, and enterprise workflows ensure its continued presence. But entrenchment is not the same as growth. A product can remain widely used while slowly losing strategic importance. The irony is that Microsoft as a company may be stronger than ever. Its cloud division thrives. Its productivity suite dominates. Its stock price reflects confidence. But Windows, the product that built the empire, is no longer the undisputed heart of personal computing. Consider how rarely people talk about upgrading their operating system with excitement. Most users delay updates as long as possible. The OS has become invisible plumbing, necessary but uninspiring. That's a profound change from the era when a new Windows release felt like stepping into the future. The silent collapse is also about narrative. Technology thrives on momentum and storytelling. Companies that capture imagination tend to shape markets. When was the last time Windows captured imagination? Instead, innovation narratives often revolve around devices, ecosystems, or AI breakthroughs. Windows appears as a supporting character. Yet collapse doesn't mean failure. It can mean transformation. Windows may evolve into a compatibility layer for enterprise needs, a foundation for legacy applications, a stable host for cloud connect. It may become less visible but still indispensable in certain domains. The question is whether that role satisfies the ambitions once associated with it. There's also the question of generational turnover. As older IT professionals retire and younger ones step into leadership roles, preferences shift. Many young developers are more comfortable in Unix-like environments. They grew up deploying 2 cloud servers running Linux. Their loyalty to Windows is weaker. Over decades, such shifts compound. Another subtle signal lies in hardware innovation cycles. Excitement often surrounds new phones, tablets, or specialized devices. PC launches generate less mainstream buzz unless they push extreme performance boundaries. For average consumers, upgrading a laptop feels routine, not revolutionary. If the hardware isn't thrilling, the software riding on it struggles to be thrilling too. Remote work trends further abstract the OS with virtual desktops, containerized apps, and browser-based collaboration. The local environment becomes less significant. The value shifts to network reliability and cloud platforms. Windows continues to function, but as a gateway rather than a destination. The education market offers a glimpse of the future. When students grow up immersed in web-first ecosystems, their expectations change. They don't necessarily expect to install heavy desktop software. They expect instant access through a browser. If that mindset persists into adulthood, the traditional Windows model faces long-term pressure. Meanwhile, open source collaboration accelerates innovation outside proprietary ecosystems. Developers contribute to shared tools, frameworks, and platforms that run everywhere. The gravitational pull of a single dominant desktop OS weakens as the industry embraces portability. The silent collapse is not a dramatic fall from a cliff. It's erosion by 1,000 currents. Each current alone seems minor. Mobile growth, cloud adoption, cross-platform frameworks, ARM processors, education trends, gaming experiments, AI interfaces, but together they reshape the landscape. Windows once defined the boundaries of computing. Now, computing expands beyond any single operating system. It lives in the cloud, in browsers, in mobile apps, in smart devices, in distributed systems. Windows participates, but it no longer defines. And perhaps that's the most telling sign. When an operating system becomes just another participant rather than the arena itself, its era of unquestioned dominance has ended. The collapse is silent because it doesn't feel like a disaster. It feels like normalization, like gravity shifting slightly, like a spotlight dimming while others brighten. In the end, the story of Windows is not one of sudden failure, but of gradual decentralization. Power influence spreads. The monopoly of attention fades. Microsoft adapts, pivots, thrives in new arenas. But Windows, the once unshakable titan of personal computing, stands in a different position now. Still strong, still vast, yet no longer the axis around which the digital universe spins. And that is how collapse begins. Not with a crash, not with headlines declaring the end, but with a quiet realization that the world has moved on, that the center has shifted, and that what was once indispensable has become optional. The silent collapse of Windows has already started, and the only question left is how far it will go and what will rise fully in its place.